One of the reasons why we tend to have so much woodpecker damage around structures are because of carpenter bees. Now, what carpenter bees do, specifically the females, is they do burrow into the wood. They don't eat the wood, they actually make a tunnel system in the wood where they go ahead and they lay their eggs for the insects to hatch out of. I don't want to get a lot into the carpenter bees themselves, aside from explaining what this is about, why we're going to talk about ways to control carpenter bees, which then will help with controlling the woodpeckers. But some people may not know exactly what a carpenter bee is. Now, I've got some dead ones here. I know that it's going to be very hard to see on camera. I've got 3 of them here. What I want to point out to you is that if you have a large, kind of like a black and yellow insect that is flying around the house that you actually see burrowing into like your soffit, siding, a ridge beam or something along those lines, it's most likely a carpenter bee. Now, the easiest way to tell the difference between a carpenter bee and a bumblebee is by looking at their abdomen. And so if I pick this one right here, I don't know how well this is going to show up, but this is the abdomen and it's going to be shiny. It's going to be solid black. It's going to be reflective. Like I said, it's going to be shiny. Versus a bumblebee is not going to be smooth and shiny like this. It's actually going to be hairy, and it's going to have a yellow stripe on it as well. So if you see a black and white large insect flying around that appears to be hairy, the abdomen on it is not shiny. It has a yellow stripe on it. That's going to be a bumblebee. Versus if you don't see the hairiness to it, if you just see a solid shiny black abdomen on it, that's going to be your carpenter bee. Now, despite popular belief, carpenter bees, specifically the females, can sting. Generally, they're not going to sting unless you're sitting there handling them, basically making the animal feel that it needs to do something in self-defense. Then it's going to go ahead and do that. But if it's just flying around, it's not like it's going to land on you and sting you. A lot of people say they cannot sting. A lot of people say that they bite. That's not true. It is definitely a sting from the female. Now, when it comes to control of carpenter bees, you do have a couple options. The most common option is to use a pesticide. I've been battling with carpenter bees for over 20 years on my personal property. And so the options are either you can hire a company that is licensed to apply a pesticide, have them come out on really a monthly basis during the seasons. And again, this will be based upon where you're living. But during the seasons when the carpenter bees are active, they'll come out like on a monthly contract. They'll apply a pesticide to the house. That will kill your existing adult or mature carpenter bees. Normally, though, it does not kill the developmental larvae or the eggs that are yet to hatch that are protected by the wood. So you do have something with the pesticide called a residual effect. Sometimes, based upon the product that's used, that might help control some of those unborn or larval stage insects. Other times it may not. It's going to be based upon, did the chemical reach them? Or when they came in contact with the chemical, is there enough chemical there to kill the insect? For the homeowner, business owner themselves, there are pesticides that you can go ahead and you can purchase. Again, I've been battling with this for over 20 years on my own property. I've tried a multitude of pesticides. I am a licensed pesticide applicator here in the state of Ohio, so I was able to use some restricted use pesticides, which the general public do not have access to. I've also used general use pesticides, which the public does have access to. And that's going to be the pesticides you find going to a home improvement store or going online. So generally there's 3 different types of pesticides for homeowners or business owners that they can use. They're going to be a spray type, they're going to be a dust or a powder type, and then you have, this is the latest one that I found this year, which is actually an expandable foam type that has the pesticide put into it. Quite honestly, none of these products has ever given me what I consider to be acceptable results, specifically long-term. All I've seen every year is more woodpecker damage on my home, as well as the increase of the carpenter bee numbers. And the woodpecker damage is being caused because we have, as I was saying, the larvae that's developing inside of this tunnel system that the female has dug or burrowed out of the wood, and the woodpecker is getting there and they can hear those grubs, and so they will go ahead and they will peck through and pull it out. And when you see the size of the grubs that these woodpeckers are pulling out, it's really quite impressive. So out of frustration this year, I actually tried a non-pesticide product. Never thought it would work, but again, after 20 years of doing what I consider to be a losing battle, I just said something has to change. And let me tell you, I am very, very surprised at the results that I have achieved with it. So what we're going to do in the remainder of this video is I'm going to show you how to make a carpenter bee trap. Now, these traps, you can purchase them. They start at $20 and go up from there. There's all kinds of different ones available, but you can make them, most people can make them with really products they have around the house for the most part. If you do have to get something, it's not that much that you have to spend. What I really like about it this year is that I'm not doing anything with pesticides on my property. So I'm not affecting the environmental footprint of the house. I am not doing anything that I have to worry about pets or secondary issues with. Instead, all I'm doing is I am making what is called a carpenter bee trap, and I am placing it, and we'll discuss about placement later on, but it's working. To date, I have caught over 20 carpenter bees in 3 traps that I have out right now. And that has been over about a 10-week period now. If I compare that to my pesticide use, I would have already done probably 6 to 12 applications with the pesticide, because again, every time that you have a egg hatch and a larvae is present, that's going to mature into an adult, and so you're going to have to treat again. Unless you have a strong enough residual product that kills that, but if it doesn't kill it, you've got to treat. And again, in comparison, I would say on average that each treatment with the pesticides, I was killing between 0 and 3 bees, and that was it. So I am very, very pleased with the carpenter traps. Let me go ahead now and get into the materials and the tools and hardware that you're going to need if you would like to go ahead and make one yourself. Okay, let's talk about the materials now that you're going to need to make your own carpenter bee trap. The first thing that you're going to need is a block of wood. Now, what I've got here is a piece of pre-treated 4x4. It doesn't have to be a 4x4, but it does need to be something about the size of a 4x4, which in reality is actually a 3x3. So if you're really big into woodworking and you don't have any blocks, if you want to take 2x4s, glue them together, cut them, that's absolutely fine. In my experience, because I've tried both, it doesn't matter if the wood's pre-treated or if it is kiln dried. It just seems to be that you just need a hunk of wood. I have not tried this with a 6x6 block. I don't know if that would be overkill. I can definitely see it still working, but aesthetically I can also tell you with the 4x4 how I make these, they really do blend into the house pretty nicely. So what you want to do is you want to have a block that's about 6 inches. This is just under 6 inches, and I'll explain why you want it to be 6 inches. It could be 7 inches, it could even be 8 inches, but anything over 8 inches is going to be overkill. And again, now you start getting into how it's going to look when you have it hanging up on the house. The next thing that you're going to need is you're going to need a container. I prefer the glass jars. You're going to need the ring, whatever lid. This isn't the lid, this is the ring that holds the lid. Notice that unlike other videos that are out there on YouTube and stuff, I have a total opening here. I don't have the metal lid. There's a reason for that. It's also why I'm not recommending that you take like a empty jelly jar or jam jar, even though you can do this if you want. The problem that I noticed when I first started making this or making these is that when I used the lid, I was getting refusal by the carpenter bees. I was getting material inside the container in the bottom, but I didn't have any bees. One of the main reasons for this, I feel, is that if you use a lid, you have to cut an opening in the lid. And trying to drill out metal if you don't have the proper material for it, specifically something that small and that thin, can be extremely difficult to do. And so I was surprised to actually try some things out and find out that that's not even necessary. So instead of trying to talk about now you need to create a punch or you need to do this with this size drill bit, my recommendation for you is don't even bother with the lid if you do like this canning material I have. So again, I've got the ring here and I've got just a regular pint size canning jar is it. There are some makes professionally made out there where you can attach like a plastic bottle to it. I'm sure that you could do plastic if you found the right plastic with it, but it's not going to work with the design I'm showing for you to go ahead and use like a 20-ounce water bottle or a 20-ounce pop bottle. That opening is going to be too small. And the commercially made traps that use those devices, they actually install a second or an additional piece that's going to be like a funnel so that the bees come into the funnel and then they fall down into that water bottle or whatever. This is, to me, the simplest way to do it. So I would highly recommend that you go with, again, like a jam jar, a pint jar. This has about looks like a 2.5 or 3 inch opening, and that's exactly what I would recommend for it. In terms of hardware that you're going to need for it, what I like is I like these eye screws. This is for hanging it, and so either I'll run a piece of wire or I will run a piece of chain from top of it when this is completely put together. And then in order to hold that rim on and this is, again, I forget what these are called, so if I keep referring to it as a lid, this is what I'm talking about, the ring here, not the actual lid, which would have been inside of it. But what I do is I use screws. Now there's 2 types of screws that you can use. You can use a regular like drywall screw. You can also use a screw that actually has like a flange with it or a washer. Either one of these is going to work. If you do happen to have a crown stapler, I'm going to recommend that you crown staple instead. And the reason being is that when you use your screws into this ring, it's very easy to bend this ring a little bit. And that's where it's very nice if you're using the ones with the washer, because when you put it in, you don't have to go through the ring itself. You can make it where that lip is actually holding onto the ring, versus if you're using like the drywall screw, you actually have to go through the material itself. But in terms of material, it's the wood, it's the screws, it's however you're going to hang it. That's all you need. Tool-wise, you are going to need a drill. And of course, I have a bit on there so that I can put in my screws. You're also going to need some paddle bits. The hole in the bottom is going to be made by this. This is a 1.5 inch paddle bit. I've not done 1.5 inch in size. I have done 1 inch in size, but I've also seen ones that are 2 inches. So I'm kind of splitting the difference there. I think that this is going to work really good. And then the entrance holes, again, other videos will talk about use a 1/2 inch bit. I have had refusal with 1/2 inch. I don't know if I just happen to have some really big carpenter bees or exactly what's going on with that. But I've decided instead to go to the 5/8 because when I have reamed out my 1/2 inch holes to 5/8 of an inch, I have seen a difference with how effective the trap is. And I just have a feeling that with the 1/2 inch size, that's probably the normal size for a carpenter bee if they are making the hole themselves. However, carpenter bees will go ahead and they will continue to excavate openings and create new tunnel systems from the existing ones. And I just think going up that little 1/8 of an inch, the bee can't tell the difference. It's easier for it to get inside. And then what's going to happen, as you'll see, when we make this, is the bee's going to come in and the hole will be drilled at an angle. It gets into, and then it basically falls down the big opening. And this is where I think the problem with that lid is I think that when that bee comes down, whether it climbs down or whether it falls down onto the lid, well, it's able to stay on that lid and reattach itself then to the wood and climb back up to the opening and get out. These insects are used to climbing through wood, so that's not unrealistic whatsoever. And that's why if you are going to use like a jelly jar, if you are going to use an actual canning lid, you're going to want to make sure that you cut the hole in that the same size of the tunnel or inside diameter that we put into the wood. And then the last thing that we're going to need is we're going to need a ruler and something to mark our piece of wood with. So having said that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. I'm going to throw my glasses on real quick. One of the things that I've noticed is that when we start measuring this out, what we're going to do is we're going to put the 1.5 inch hole here in the bottom, and then we're going to put 3 or 4 access holes. I don't see a difference between 3 or 4 in terms of effectiveness into this block that connect to that center hole. Those access holes with the 5/8 inch paddle bit are going to be drilled at an angle. The angle is going to be somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees. I don't know, quite honestly, if you put them in at a 90-degree angle, if that's going to change anything. I can't tell you for a fact if you put it in at a 75-degree angle that it's going to change it. I've not tried it. All I can tell you is that with my success with it, they're at about a 45-degree angle. And so to me, the most important thing is where you start that hole at. You don't want to start too far down the bottom here. So what I've done is I measure up 1.5 inches from the bottom, and that gives me what I call the landing lip or the landing area. That's where I'm going to start my hole at. And then I also go ahead and I measure and make it as close to the center as possible. Now, if you're slightly off, nobody's going to throw you in carpenter bee trap jail for, being off. If you're too high with it, too low with it, too much to the left, too much to the right, it's not centered. None of that's going to matter. What matters is that to make everything attach properly, the closer you can get them to being center 1.5 inches up, the closer you can get your main channel to being dead center in your block of wood, the easier it is to put the trap together. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start by measuring up 1.5 inches, and I'm going to mark that on my piece of wood. Then I'm going to come across to where my center point approximately is. And you probably cannot see that, but now I have that marked. I've already done 3 other sides. So the last thing I'm going to do is to find my center point on my block as close as possible. All I'm going to do is take my ruler and go from the center of one corner to another. I'm going to draw a line, rotate it. I'm going to do this again. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but that point there in the center, that X right here, that's where I'm going to start boring for my main channel. So let me go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and do my drilling. There's no point for anybody to watch me drill. It doesn't make sense. Let me drill that, and then I'm going to be back and we will continue with putting the rest of the trap together. All right, I've gone ahead and I've done my drills or my boring. I do like to use a drill press with it. I have a bit of an issue with shaking. You can see on my bottom hole here that's not exactly centered, which again, that's absolutely fine. I had to go in about 3.5 inches to make sure that the holes are connecting, and I did put 4 of my 5/8 holes in, and you can see this way that each one of these is sitting at an angle. Got some different angles here, but again, that's absolutely fine. And so get the stuff, everything out. And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna continue putting this together. So we need to go ahead and we need to put the lip on. So we're gonna go ahead and start with this. I'm gonna put my glasses back on so I can actually see what I'm doing. This is probably out of your camera frame, and I apologize for that. I'm gonna go ahead and get this started. There's one of them. You can see I'm just putting that in with the screws. So now I have my lid in place. The next thing I like to do is actually put in my eye hook or eye screw. I don't like trying to do this once the dark jar is attached. So I've got a little start thing up here, meaning that I put a bit of a hole there so I could get this started. And now we have our eye in place, and then we just take our jar and we just tighten our jar onto it. All that I have left to do is go ahead and actually either do a chain if I wanted a chain with this, or I like using 16 gauge tire wire. It's a trapping thing. The wire itself, I have found that you want to be only about 6 inches in size. 8 inches is fine as well. What you don't want, and again with my experience, I'm not saying that you don't have a different issue where it wouldn't change, is that in my experience I found that you don't want to put this too close to the hole. So for instance, if this is my beam where I'm having my carpenter bees work, I don't want to put this level. It doesn't seem to work as well. Same thing is I don't want to put it, you know, 12 inches, 18 inches, 24 inches below that area. There does seem to be a sweet spot with it. And then really the only other thing I have to talk about with this is that how you mount these is you just put a nail or screw into the area. And this to me is the most important part. I recommend doing that close to where you're currently seeing activity for the bees using a hole. I've read elsewhere that these traps are supposed to have a 10-foot, 15-foot effective range. Either I have so many bees with so many holes that it doesn't work for me, or that's just not true. Where I've had really good success with these is determining where the access hole is for those carpenter bees, and then hanging that basically about 4 to 6 inches below that hole, you know, really close to it. So if the hole's right here, I'll put a nail or screw literally off to the side to it, hang it 4 to 6 inches below that hole. One of my traps had 12 bees in it within that was within a 7-day time period, is how effective and how fast these can work. All 3 of my traps that I have, this will be number 4 now, they all have caught carpenter bees with it. Generally my catch is about 3 per trap as of right now before I move it to another location. But again, that first one that I put up, first one trying it to see would it work or not, and catching 12 carpenter bees in it, that was actually phenomenal. So that's how easy it is to make a carpenter bee trap. They're great, again, for the environment because you don't have to use pesticides to control the carpenter bees. All you do is once the bees are expired, you go ahead, you unscrew the container, dump them out, wash out the container, put the container back on, and you're good to go. And if you're scared of using glass, you could, I'm sure, use plastic. You're just going to have to figure out how to cut that opening in the lid of the plastic container so that you can go ahead and do it. You want that big hole like I was talking about before. This is a 1.5 inch hole. You want something nice and big like that so that when the carpenter bee lands here, climbs up, comes in here, they either fall or they climb down and then they come straight into the jar. There's nothing allowing them to go ahead and reverse themselves to climb back out. That to me seems to be one of the biggest ways to make these effective. So I hope that you like that. I hope that you try these and that you have success with them. If you would like more information on how to deal with woodpecker problems with your house or other wildlife control issues, we do have our online training site that can be found at wildlifetraining.think, T-H-I-N-K, IFIC, I-F-I-C, period, C-O-M. And we'll have a link here with the video for going to that. You can sign up for free. We have free content. We have paid content that's on the site. We're constantly adding new courses to it. So for our woodpecker course, as a thank you for everybody watching this, if you would like to take the course, we have two different courses. One is for professionals, the other is for homeowners or business owners. The only difference between the two is that the professional course has tests in it and a certificate that they can print out upon completion of it, whereas the homeowner course does not have that in it. That's the only difference between those two courses, but we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna give you a code. The code will be in the description. And so you can go ahead, if you would like, sign up on that site. Again, we'll have a link to that site in the description. Check it out. If you have questions, let us know, and we'll see you on the next video.